Rockstar Games used to be known for their diverse portfolio of games. Manhunt, Smuggler's Run, Midnight Club, The Warriors, LA Noire, Bully, Max Payne. It's this legacy that made them a household name and a developer that defined so many of our childhoods. But those days are long in the past, and despite everyone believing that Bully 2 had the potential to be a breakout hit, the next big thing, Rockstar Games quietly has buried this franchise. Rarely do we see anything more than mere mentions of the first game by former developers. Its cult classic status is well known and established. There's a loyal fan base that has been yearning for any signs of hope that over the years has turned into a what could have been feeling. It's one of those games that should have happened by now, and if this were any other developer in gaming, it probably would have. But the thing is, Bully 2 was real. For some time, Rockstar mapped out and designed the sequel. It was playable. Jimmy Hopkins' story was going to continue, and for years, bits and pieces have leaked out. Concept art, early builds, even stories from former devs about how ambitious it was supposed to be. So in this video, we're going to dig into what Bully 2 actually was, the original vision, how far it got, and why Rockstar ultimately pulled the plug on one of the most anticipated sequels in gaming history. So while some projects like this never made it past the finish line, others are stepping up to carry that same creative spirit forward. As the games industry evolves, promising new games continue to emerge, and today's sponsor Zoopunk perfectly exemplifies that. A brand new action RPG set in the same universe as Fist, Forged, and Shadow Torch. It's taking that world of Animal Diesel Punk Rebellion and pushing it into full 3D. Darker, sharper, and way more ambitious. The story kicks off at the start of an unknown war, with the spark now corrupting the world and turning creatures into monsters. There's playable characters such as Rayton, the tactical rabbit fighter, Brayden, a rhino with a mechanical heart and a chainsaw blade, and Trixie, a chipmunk mechanic who fights and rolls into combat like a blur. Everything runs on this gritty, Eastern-inspired diesel punk vibe. Snowfields, swamps, crystal forests, and post-war ruins, all rebuilt in 3D with way more detail and particle effects than before. And yeah, the combat you see in the trailer, that's actual gameplay built around martial arts moves, quick, weighty, and cinematic. There's many Souls-likes flooding the market right now, but this here stands out as being fresh and unique. Check out Zoopunk's full extended trailer that features additional gameplay, and follow its official pages for updates. Stay tuned for upcoming gameplay tests, and drop your thoughts in the comments. This one is worth keeping an eye on and might just be the next big thing. Thank you again to Zoopunk for supporting the channel by sponsoring the video. What happened to Bully 2? That has been the question Bully fans have been asking themselves for over a decade now, because it seems like multiple times a Bully 2 was in development at Rockstar Games, and unfortunately it just went absolutely nowhere. And this topic was recently brought up again because Dan Houser, the lead creator for a long time at Rockstar Games, left the company just a couple of years ago, was asked about Bully 2 in a recent interview with IGN, and he gave the reasoning for why it had not happened at Rockstar. And this is what he had to say.
Well, you brought up Bully. I would again. It would be criminal. It would be journalistic malpractice of me to not ask. Why did we never get a sequel to Bully?
I think there was just bandwidth issues. You know, if you've got a small lead creative team and a small senior leadership crew, you just can't do all the projects you want. And you know, with certainly how we're structuring it absurd, we're trying to do 2 projects with a fairly small team, and it's really trying to think through that. How can we do that and keep them both moving?
So the issue I have just with that statement alone, he blames it on bandwidth issues. And a lot of people look at that, they're frustrated over that. They also understand that Rockstar Games is a very different developer now than what they were back in the early 2000s, in which you had so many franchises coming about and they were firing on all cylinders. Nowadays it's Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead, and that might be the foreseeable future for this company even after Grand Theft Auto 6. Now the thing is though, bandwidth issues really doesn't define what happened with Bully 2, because I guess the issue I take with Houser's statement here is that it acts like the project wasn't very far into development, but that's just not the case based on everything we're about to go over. So the story of Bully 2 and the game that we were robbed of really begins in 2009 in an interview with the original game's composer, and he talked about that he was going to be working on Bully 2. Sean Lee said in 2009 in an interview with the Gaming Library, only available through archives now, this interview, yes, it looks like I'll be doing the soundtrack for Bully 2 in the not-so-distant future. Over the years, he really distanced himself from these comments, likely because of Rockstar Games and Take-Two Interactive reaching out and saying, hey, you have an NDA, don't talk about any of this stuff. But ultimately, he was working on Bully 2 because there was seemingly dozens of developers working on this game, and it got extensive amount of work. But before we get to all of that, again, it's just important to really set the environment, the understanding that this game really was talked about in a different light than what it is nowadays, in which it's just non-existent. But Dan Houser, on multiple occasions, 2011, he indicated that this was going to happen. Grand Theft Auto studio head Dan Houser suggests Rockstar Vancouver, which today no longer exists, could return to school set franchise after Max Payne 3. This is the thing that got people so hopeful, and yeah, nothing happened. So we all knew that we didn't want to start doing the Bully sequel instantly at the second with those guys, even though it's a property that, like Max, we adore and might come back to in the future, said Hauser. There was just no impetus to do that then. So we said, you can do Max, and then we will see what we can do with Bully. That was 2011. A couple of years later, when, Grand Theft Auto 5, all the work on that was going about, he did another interview, and he talked about a Bully sequel, saying, I know I want to. Well, hopefully, you never know. There's a lot of directions I could go with that one. It's funny. An idea some have suggested to Hauser, he explained, is for Rockstar Games to make a future Grand Theft Auto game with a grown-up bully protagonist, Jimmy Hopkins, as the lead. This probably won't happen, Hauser said. I never saw him as being that level of a degenerate. I saw him as a bad teen because he comes from a tough time who could go either direction. He's not going to be a carjacker. He's too white-collar for that already. He's at a shit private school, but he's going to end up being really happy because he's at the worst bit of his life, or being sort of messed up with white-collar doofus. He was an unpleasant soul, but he had a heart. To some extent, you could say the same was true of Nico from Grand Theft Auto 4 in a bizarre way, but Jimmy's not trying to burn down the school. He's more trying to stand up to injustice. And that was what Dan Houser, the lead creator for a long time at Rockstar Games, was saying about Bully, but since then, just real absolute silence on this franchise. And the truth is, though, even though Hauser talks about this almost like, yeah, we'll see, maybe one day, it got really far into development that people just don't understand. And the first real indication of this and how much work was going into this project came from YouTuber Swegta. He had a video on this in 2019 talking about Bully 2's cancellation, in which we're going to talk about this concept art. There's actual images of Bully 2 that do exist on the internet, but he had a contact, or somebody within his community had a contact with an actual developer that worked on Bully 2, and they gave a couple of remarks about the work that they did on the game. Although they did in a way that kind of says like, oh, we're not really working on Bully 2, but if I was working on Bully 2, this is what I was working on. These are a couple of his remarks that he made to this individual, saying, since Rockstar has never officially acknowledged Bully 2, I definitely can't say one way or another. I definitely can't say that I worked on it for several months before getting laid off when the project was canceled, nor could I talk about the pranks or the climbing system I definitely wasn't working on. I distinctly said I wasn't working on them. Definitely not adding a tripwire prank attempting to use early rope physics from Red Dead, nor did I add the ability to do a running dive into a garbage can to hide from someone chasing you, or to put your back to a column or a tree, and shimmy around it to stay out of sight. And then finally, the last one he says here about the story, the non-existent game was definitely not about Jimmy's summer vacation at his mom's new husband's enormous house. There wasn't a summer camp or a nearby town to explore. You didn't have new step-siblings to cope with. That is a lot. That is a lot of information that very much outlines that there was a bold vision for Bully 2 that seemed to really expand on this game's universe and also the character of Jimmy Hopkins. And that's why I do think if we ever do see this franchise return, it's probably going to be a total revival, and the fact that I don't think we're ever going to see this character Jimmy Hopkins, but it's just really interesting to think what could have happened here. But this is just touching on what we know about Bully 2, because just a couple of months later, VGC had their own little inside scoop on Bully 2. Rockstar's sequel fizzled out after 18 months of development, and it said here, based on their sources, Rockstar New England was leading development on this game in the early 2010s. This is interesting because all indication is that Bully 2 was being developed as early as around 2008, prior to Red Dead Redemption. We're going to get into another report which indicates there was just a lot more development on this game than has been said before. It seems like between 2008 to 2012-13, this is when Bully 2 was in active development. And it's mentioned here that Rockstar co-founder Dan Houser and a handful of his most trusted developers wrote a script for Bully 2 as early as 2008, which contained the first few scenes and an outline for the rest of the story, according to sources. The story starred Jimmy, hero of the first game, and featured many returning characters. It began at Jimmy's stepdad's house in the summer at the end of a school year, which corroborates what Swegda had reported beforehand. Now, a second well-placed source told VGC the team never decided where this full story would take Jimmy, and that depicting some of his time back in education, perhaps at school or college, was one option being discussed. And college Jimmy, that would have been interesting. It really would have, but we'll never see this vision, unfortunately. And then this is where they talk a little bit more about the timeline. A few years later, sometime between Red Dead Redemption's release in May 2010 and the end of 2013, a team at Rockstar New England spent between a year and 18 months building out the concept, a second source told them. It existed, it was playable, it was just a shame it never got off the ground. Now, unfortunately, the Bully community has had a lot of fake leaks over the years. There was a Game Informer situation, which cover art, people were really thinking an announcement was about to be made because of that. That didn't turn out to be anything. There was also fake leaks such as this concept art that somebody passed off, made it seem like it was real. It was not. The Bully 2 leaks are confirmed fake. Swag actually talked about this at the time. Again, those off-camera screenshots. Nowadays, though, AI, you can make anything look fake, but yes, this very much was one thing that got people hopeful around 2019 that, oh my god, maybe it is happening. Maybe it is coming after Red Dead Redemption 2, but unfortunately, this was confirmed as a concept art of somebody. But the thing is, we did actually get some official images, some official concept art from the game. This actually happened a couple of years ago, again, from a random Twitter account. Bully 2, it just emerged out of the blue with a bunch of screenshots that have been now verified by former Rockstar developers. Bully 2 leaked screenshots and concept art are legit. Again, this is sources that have spoken to Game Informer, VGC, and a number of other outlets, but this is actual concept art, actual images from Bully 2, and there's that watermark is from the original account from on Twitter that just randomly appeared out of the blue. But yeah, we get this look at this nerdy looking individual. This is all concept art again of Bully 2, some more images, references of who the inspiration behind these characters. Patton Oswalt there, it seemingly was the inspiration of this individual. Here we go, we got another one. Yeah, it looks like they're gonna have some crazy characters we could have been able to find in the universe, and then the individual obviously voicing their displeasure with Take-Two Interactive. We got another one, again, showing the inspiration, which is clear from The Shining. Yeah, a veteran of an unknown war who lives in the woods, armed to the teeth, and completely psychotic, but he turns out to be a fake. He was never in the army at all. He dodged the draft and has been so ashamed that he turned himself into a survivalist. Abe. That would have been another character we could have met in the game. There's a couple more various NPCs, a goth-looking individual, tennis creepy pro-looking guy, homeless woman or something. Like I said, very Bully-esque, and it would have been interesting to see that in the form of a video game. And then we have a mailman, and then here's some actual concept art of the open world. We got one that looks totally destroyed. If you look really closely, this looks to say Jimmy's dad, so it looks like they're partying somewhere. Some other, I can't make out some of these words on here, but yeah, very interesting. And then here we have, again, more images of the open world that they were building, some more concept art. Like I said, Bully 2 made it a lot farther than people understand, and it really is just so sad that we never got this experience to play for ourselves, especially because it would have been very different than the original Bully. It was going to have a bigger scale and scope. Here's another one. Here's a wider image again of the open world that they were building. The back door, yeah. Like I said, I really do dig these looks and what it could have been. Yeah, here's a couple more images. Like I said, there was a lot of screenshots, a lot of images that did get out of this. And it seems like this was maybe going to be Jimmy's neighborhood. It was a smaller little set area. Very unclear how far this was going to go, but this wasn't the full game. I think that's clear based on what we're about to get into a second. But I do think it is worth just at least highlighting the 3D models that an individual made on the GTA forums. It gives you a better idea of how this could have looked in actual video game form. And I think this screenshot right here just really like what could have been. And yeah, this is the reference art. This is the 3D that they made. This is a couple of years ago, not AI or anything, but still very interesting to look at. But now we get to the massive insider report. This is where we get a lot more details about just how far Bully 2 was in development. The version of Bully 2 you never get to play. This is something that really kind of went under the radar, but this was a report from Game Informer about 3 years ago, and they talked to multiple Rockstar developers at Rockstar New England who were working on this game as early as 2008. And this is where the report gets very interesting. It first talks about Rockstar's acquisition of the company. They go over various other issues that have happened at the studio, but they talk about after the purchase, developers at Rockstar New England began work on numerous projects. One of those projects was a sequel to Bully. According to some developers, it was a chance to prove themselves. And prove themselves was that this was going to be on the scale of Red Dead and GTA. Because the Rockstar developers behind this project, they truly envisioned a future in which it was right there up as one of the biggest gaming franchises in the world. And based on the mechanics and everything we're about to get into, it seems like yeah, it looked like it could have been that. The change in the company's release schedule at Rockstar Games also marked a shift in direction for its games. And yeah, that's one of the things people complain about. Early on, Rockstar put out a hodgepodge of titles of different genres and qualities, but after 2008, the publisher began to lean further into more expensive, more prestigious releases, often focused on an older audience and built around gunplay. Red Dead GTA. And it mentions that Rockstar New England's plan for Bully 2 was in line with this vision. This is what I'm talking about. According to developers on the project, it was a chance to let the Bully series sit alongside Rockstar games of the time, such as GTA 4 and Red Dead Redemption. It was a chance, as one former developer recalls, to shoot for the moon, because even if we don't quite make it, we're already much further than if we had aimed a little bit lower. There was a lot of focus on character, very deep systems, seeing how far we could push that, and putting it up there alongside a GTA 1 developer on the project says, I think that they wanted to bring that kind of world to the Bully universe. For developers at Rockstar New England, this meant making the world of Bully 2 bigger and deeper than that of the original game, and putting a considerable amount of resources into its creation. While Game Informer wasn't able to get an exact number of people working on the project, 3 people say almost the entire studio of Rockstar New England was working on Bully 2 at some point, with overall headcount estimations being around 50 to 70 people. So this project was a lot bigger than people understand. It, like, based on some of the interviews, Dan Houser's comments over the years, you would probably get an understanding, oh, they probably just had a handful of people, they just, wrote a couple of notes here and that. No, this game was actually pretty deep into development when you have 70 people, especially around that time, working on this game. Now, 3 different developers told us that the game's open world map wouldn't have been as big as that of GTA 4, but their estimates on its planned scope describe it as ranging from the size of GTA Vice City's open world to 3 times the size of the original Bully school map, which, yeah, probably would have been really big for its time. What it would have lacked in its overall size would have made up for with depth. For example, Rockstar New England planned to make every building in the game enterable, either by normal means or by forced entry. If you could see it, you could go into it, one former developer on the project says. That's some of the innovation that we expect out of Rockstar games, and it was going to be felt with this project. But there's even more innovation that we saw with Red Dead Redemption 2 that originally was envisioned for Bully. It's just so crazy when you think about what could have been here. Now, they mention in Bully 2, however, Rockstar New England was trying to develop ways for characters to remember Jimmy, for there to be good and bad consequences for his actions. Does that remind you of a certain game? Does it? We really wanted to make sure that people remembered what you did. So if you pulled a prank on your neighbor, they'd remember it, that your actions had more meaning beyond a 20-foot radius than the 5-second memories of the non-playable characters near you. And yeah, Red Dead Redemption fucking 2. The way that you interact with other characters in the world, more than just with your gun or with your fist, they have some sense of memory. A lot of that stuff originated in Bully 2, one developer says. And this is them referencing Red Dead Redemption 2. So yes, some of that innovation with Red Dead 2 originally was made for Bully. From what I remember reading in some of the design docs in my conversations with people is that you could build relationships with characters in the world. He says about Bully 2, you'd be like best friends with the chef in the mansion or whatever, or the chef could really hate you or something, and that would open up different options. I don't know to the extent of where this ended up, if that got pared down into a general you're good Jimmy versus you're bad Jimmy, or what, but I think in some of the early ideas being thrown around, you would have the fine-grained level of relationships to other characters in the world. Beyond the game's open world, developers described a breadth of different interactivity options and new features. One detail recalled by 2 developers was a progressive grass growing system. This is the little details that we all love about Rockstar games, where grass throughout the world would grow realistically and players could see individual blades. And it does make you wonder, are we going to see some of this maybe with Grand Theft Auto 6? Because these systems, these things, it seems like they have carried over with time. You could go and mow the lawn, and then it would actually be lower, one former developer says. You could actually do a job, go back and forth, and create lines on people's lawns. That kind of thing. Now, because Rockstar New England wanted to give players the option to break into houses, the team developed a new glass fragmentation system, new tech made for Bully 2 that had not been used in prior Rockstar games, though it'd find its way into later titles. If you played Max Payne 3 and you shot some glass, instead of just the glass breaking the same way every time, we had built this whole system to that this chunk right near the impact of the first bullet would break out, and you would see a little spider's web of glass, one developer says. Then if you shot some more of the glass, little individual chunks near where you actually shot would fall out and made it look realistic. Now, multiple people on the project described an in-depth climbing mechanic planned for the game. And that might remind you, because I think Swagtor or VGC, one of those sources, did mention this from a former developer. When exploring the open world, Jimmy would be able to climb trees, fences, and ledges on top of roofs, as well as out of his window when sneaking out. Trees were obviously a big one. We wanted the player to be able to climb up the tree to hide, or do some hijinks with all sorts of things like paintball guns or water balloons, all that sort of stuff. While the developers put a lot of work into figuring out how this climbing would be implemented into Bully 2, they never got far enough into development to completely nail it down, according to 3 former developers on the project. We worked with a lot of GTA assets just so that we could get something prototyped quickly. We tried a lot of that in. It's like, well, when he's hanging for this long, how long does he hang for before he lets go? Do we want to do a foot over foot balancing act if you're walking along a branch versus sidestepping side to side if you're working along the branch but to the side? It was stuff like that, and trying to figure out what worked or what looked the best to the player. Now, they go on to mention, housing these new features was a vertical slice of Bully 2 that Rockstar New England had up and running. And this really gets into the depth about how far this game was in development and how much more work was necessary. According to 4 developers of the studio and 1 person at Rockstar's New York City headquarters, Bully 2 was playable. Developers could run around the world and interact with objects and NPCs, and there was some missions, such as one involving go-karts, another with a beekeeper, a Camp Krusty style mission, and one that had Jimmy in his underwear, even featuring a crotch that, which they say it definitely was going to be a little risque. I do wonder if something like that would have been canceled before, well, not added to the game later on. Just knowing Rockstar Games and their reputation with controversy. But hey, it does seem like Jimmy was going to be around 18 or so years old based on some of the stuff detailed here. Now, as one developer on the project recalls, the team had mapped out all the terrain for the game's world. Additionally, NPCs were walking around doing various day-to-day tasks. Buildings and houses within the game were also starting to become feature complete, though he points out that they weren't in a shippable form yet. The game was at least 6 to 8 hours playable, said Mark Anthony Rodriguez, a former games analyst for Rockstar's New York City headquarters and one of the project leads on Bully Scholarship Edition. So fully rendered, fully realized. 2 developers Game Informer spoke to estimate that if development had continued, Bully 2 would still have needed 2 to 3 or more years before being ready to be shipped, but unfortunately that never happened. People were taken off of the project, and some of the knowledge, some of the work that they did on the game carried over to Red Dead 2, but ultimately Bully 2, that version of it, was dead, and it really is sad because it seemed like it could have been a game that defines the Xbox One, PS4 generation if it had, been fully developed. They just needed a couple more years, but they wanted to focus their attention on their big home run franchise, and they viewed that with Red Dead Redemption 2. It's quite clear that Rockstar Games didn't truly believe in Bully 2 being maybe the next big thing in the video game industry, and that will forever make me sad. But hey, things can change in the future, and it is worth mentioning, at least this is the timeline that Game Informer talks about. They say that they heard through developers that the game was in development between 2008 and 2010, but VGC says that it apparently went to 2013 as far. So this game was in development, being worked on to some extent and seemingly for at least 4 or 5 years. And they said that it began work at least before the release of Red Dead Redemption. And they did say of Bully 2 maybe being in development nowadays. They said that we were not able to confirm whether that anyone at Rockstar New England or any other Rockstar studio is still working on the project, although one developer says a build of the game still existed at Rockstar New England as recently as a few years ago, parts of which were used as reference materials for later projects like Red Dead Redemption 2 with the NPC tech. And it is worth just reminding everybody that another known Rockstar insider, Jan2295, said this in 2017, that Bully Bully 2 was in development. This is right. You got to think about the timeline of this, and it was supposed to be the next Rockstar game after Red Dead Redemption 2. Think about that timing. They were getting closer to the nearing of the end of Red Dead Redemption 2's development, and they were starting to probably think about what they were going to work afterwards on. Now, obviously, I think a lot of the company, they were going to be focusing on Grand Theft Auto 6 no matter what, but I do think that there had to be an ultimatum or some sort of conversation behind the scenes of maybe we work on a couple of projects. Maybe it's not just Grand Theft Auto 6, but ultimately they chose the way that we went about Red Dead Redemption 2's development, let's just keep that with Grand Theft Auto 6, and that meant that Bully 2 just never continued further. But it does give indication that this project, while it was alive in development between 2008 to 2013 with that vision that we talked about just beforehand, there was another version of this being developed around 2017. And unfortunately, again, this one, for what it's worth, it was canceled a couple of years later. This was indicated by insider Tez2. Tez here is talking about Grand Theft Auto 6, talking a little bit out of the timeline, but he does mention the latter was canned in 2017, so I presume that they did that to focus on GTA 6, and that's probably what happened. And for what it is worth, Jan2295 was known for being a massive Rockstar insider for a long time, and he did confirm afterwards that, yes, he's right about Tez2 saying it was canceled in 2017, right after he said that it began development. So it was revived, and then almost instantly they said, no, we're going to, keep our attention, let's focus on getting Red Dead Redemption 2 out the door, and then it's just Grand Theft Auto 6. But the legacy of Bully does live on, and this is something that does need to be mentioned. Swegta, massive Bully, YouTuber for many years, he is actually working on Bully Online right now, a mod to bring multiplayer to this 20-year-old game. That is just so cool. And yeah, it is supposed to be launching in December 2025. He has released some new footage, some trailer. It really is awesome to see that the Bully, this franchise just continues to live on, and it's still growing, it's still getting more popular, it's still living with that cult classic status, and I do hope that Rockstar Games and Take-Two Interactive don't bring their lawyers in, because they're notorious for stuff like this. But it is nice to see that the original Bully game at least is still immensely popular within those circles, and they're keeping it alive, while Rockstar Games unfortunately just kind of forgets about it. But maybe that changes in the future, but at the very least we are seeing other companies jump in to at least kind of give players an experience that mirrors it in many ways. And this was an indie game that was announced not too long ago. It's called Age Feel High, Rock the School, and it very much is wearing that. Yeah, it's wearing Bully as its inspiration. It's a game that is filling a hole that is right now in the hearts of so many gamers worldwide. I don't know if this turns out that great, but it's awesome to see that we're seeing more games kind of like Bully coming about. And maybe this is the next big thing on the market, who knows? But either way, Bully 2, the original vision, it's totally an experience that we were robbed of. It definitely sounds like it was going to be innovative in many different ways. And this, remember, Dan Houser, he was going to be writing that experience. I think it would have been a legendary experience, but it's one of those games we can only think about what could have been. Anyway, what do you make of Bully 2? What do you make of the original vision, the concept art, all of the things that have leaked? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value. Consider subscribing for more videos like this. I'll see you later.